The Kansas City Chiefs. I've said this before, and I will very likely be on an island here when it comes to this. I do not like when a team is enduring a lot of off-season noise. Now, that's not all. Of course, now I'm not going to Max Kellerman, Tom Brady this, where I say Patrick Mahomes is falling off a cliff, and then they go on to, and then the New England Patriots continue to dominate. We're not going to go that far. But I will say that there were a lot of troubling signs last year that we saw with this Kansas City Chiefs team. There wasn't a whole lot that really changed my mind in terms of the concerns that I saw. So of course they ended up winning the Super Bowl last year, but the margins are always slim for any championship. This much is clear. Now, they're through their veteran leadership, through them having been through there, and through some great plays by great players, they ended up doing enough at the end, of course, to win. But let's be clear, this was a team where it you could have legitimately asked if they were going to be able to um to win multiple playoff games at one point in the season. Let's remember they went through that rough stretch where people were starting to push the hit the panic button, and I thought deservedly so at the time. Now they ended up figuring it out, and and the rest, as they say, is history. But right, this in the regular season, this was a 10-7 team, or sorry, not a 10-7. This was 11-6 team. And if it weren't for the fact that the rest of the AFC West was complete garbage, and for example, the AFC East or the AFC North, very much on the board that the Kansas City Chiefs would have won their division. Very much on the board. And again, it's odd because they were nearly 500 at home. And so, all right, it's something of a lazy narrative to just say, well, they won it, so therefore they should win it again. Well, no. um, the other teams are going to try to this year, and now the main thing that is bringing me to this, if I'm being honest with you, is I see across the Pro Football Focus that that they have the number 5 wide receiver group. They have the number 1 um they have the number 1 offensive line core now, and whatever you may have. And I'm largely unimpressed by anything Pro Football Focus publishes. Uh, Nothing against Pro Football Focus. I'm sure they're wonderful people, you know. But yeah, I legitimately question how they come up with these lists sometimes, and and the methodology that they use, because when we all look at the same game, we all look at things the same way. And I will tell you, I can't do this regularly because I'm one person versus them having a staff. But I will just say, when I have analyzed the same players or the same group positions, or even in the same game, I will tell you I have had drastically different results than Pro Football Focus. So again, um, not that I'm the big end all be all, but I'm for sure saying Pro Football Focus is just let's keep it real there. Some odd things, but either way, let that was a little bit of a Pro Football Focus drive by, but it's fine. um what let's keep this now. Let's focus back up, Gabriel. Okay. The reason I'm bringing up Pro Football Focus, and the reason that people had questions about them last year, was of course their wide receiver core. I think that's fair. That's more than fair. Now, this year, Pro Football Focus has that wide receiver core in the top 5, and the tight end group in the top 5. The Like I said, the O line group in the top 5, and for sure Mahomes is top 5 quarterback. Um, I won't go so far as to say that he's not the best there, right? All right, I don't want to dilute this conversation with a is Patrick Mahomes good or not? Yeah, of course he is. And for now, I'll concede that he may or may not be the best quarterback, right? I think there are arguments, but for now, let's say sure, he's the best. The weakness last year was undoubtedly the wide receiver core. Undoubtedly. Now, they were able to overcome it a lot of times. But let's be clear that it was the strength of the defense and particularly the secondary that drove this team. And let's also not forget they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They went in that 7-game stretch. They went, or is that 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, they went in an 8-game stretch where they were 3-5, a 6-game stretch where they were 2-4. One of those ones coming to the Las Vegas Raiders, and they thought so much of their season that, you know, we all saw what happened there. But anyway, and a bad loss to Denver in there. And then three of those other losses, you could live with. You could, knowing what we know now about Green Bay, 27-19 loss isn't great. And then Buffalo, right? They're always dangerous. They're always able to give them fits. So fine. But now let's dive a little deeper. So I would say 250 yards, right? That's about where you want your quarterback to be throwing at. And we'll assign blame here in a moment. But during this stretch in particular, uh, so Mahomes, two throws for 226 yards against the Lions. That was a loss. And now earlier in the season, then they squeak by the New York Jets 23-20. Mahomes only throws for 2 or 3 yards. So that was a win, but I mean, come on. And then 240 yards by Mahomes against Denver. Now, this is that 6-game stretch I was talking about. Loss. They get a win against Miami, 21-14. Mahomes, 185 yards thrown on that day. Again, defense stepping up. Mahomes in the loss to the Eagles, 177 yards thrown. Then 298 against the Raiders. 210 against the Packers in the loss. Mahomes, 271 against the Bills in the loss. So, right, pretty close to that 250 mark. And then Mahomes 300 against the Patriots. And then Mahomes 235 in the loss then at home to the Raiders. And then even in the 25-17 win, Mahomes 245. So what is this all showing, and why am I going through all these numbers right here? This wasn't a juggernaut offense. This wasn't a team that you would have in tandem with that of a dynasty. This just flatly wasn't. It was a defensive led team. And now you get Chris Jones back. And that was undoubtedly the biggest must have of the Kansas City Chiefs offseason. That had to happen. And that's what needed to happen. But again, the secondary now going through a little bit of a reshuffling. And I think that is going to rear its head as the season comes on. And now back to Pro Football Focus, and the wide receiver core is now magically, the best wide receiver core of all time, or I don't know. Pro Football Focus said something to that effect. I can't quite remember. I'll be honest, but anyway, kidding aside, now we have this wide receiver core, and they're going to need some young bucks to step up. And I think we saw last year, I hope that we learned last year that, first of all, relying on rookies and new pieces and praying that they are the ones to step up and praying that it is them who will lead your unit, whichever one it ends up being. that's probably not a recipe for success. Okay? That is probably not the road that you want to go down. I'm just saying. Now, I do like Xavier Worthy out of Texas. I do like him a lot. Well, let's also keep this real. He's standing tall at 5'11", 165. I'm at 5'10". I don't think anyone wants me as their saving grace for their NFL franchise. And he's athletic, right? He does have a good vertical. So I think he'll be fine, but it's going to be an adjustment period for Xavier Worthy. And if he has a good rookie season, that's all you can ask out of Xavier Worthy. I don't care how high you drafted him. But I say all that to say, let's just go through this list of who's on the wide receiver roster for the Kansas City Chiefs. Marquise Brown, Mokel, oh my goodness, Nicole Hardman, Sky Moore, Rasheed Rice, Justin Ross, Kadarius Toney, and then the aforementioned Justin Watson, then the aforementioned Xavier Worthy. Right. Do we see the point? This isn't the who's of receivers. This isn't a group that necessarily instills fear in any secondary. So that I think that problem will still translate over. And then we add that Travis Kelce is a year older. He was already looking banged up, and he's already openly discussed about how much longer he wants to keep playing football. And for me, once that conversation starts happening, you're in a dangerous spot if you're a football player, if you're a UFC fighter, um, really if you're an athlete. But you get what I'm saying, where it's a high contact sport, especially. And then all of the myriad of distractions that we have seen so far. So overall, not a whole hell of a lot to like. Not a whole hell of a lot to like. Lot to like. Yes, I said it right. About this past off season. Now, you pair that now. Let's compare now the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty to that of the New England Patriots. And again, I only put dynasty in quotes for now, not because they haven't been great, and you have to give credit for winning 2 Super Bowls. So I'm not trying to dismiss that. Just like I'm not dismissing the Celtics winning the NBA Finals, but let's put this into perspective that it will not be seen as highly as past Super Bowls. Right, that's just a fact. And if you're a Celtics fan, you disagree with that, I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. Um, and just like people aren't giving Kevin Durant the credit or affirmation that he may or may not be looking for his rings in Golden State. Right? Not let's be real. Not all rings are created equal, which is why I've never been a just to count the championships, count the trophies, count the rings guy. I've never been that. Never will be. Right? I could ask a room full of kindergartners which is more, 2 or 3, and at least half will get it right. But if we're gonna be, and if you just want to be a fanboy and you just want to casually watch sports and you don't really care about getting into the nitty gritty, that's fine. That's your prerogative. That's for some. That's what sports is for. Great. Um, but then, I think you sound foolish. I think you sound silly when you base your whole and sole argument of 3 is greater than 2. And well, they've won 2 in a row. Yeah, but let's look at how they won those 2 titles. That's what I'm more interested in. I'm less interested in being able to count to 2. But for some people, that's a big step in their educational process. So we applaud them for it. But anyway, compare the dynasties of the New England Patriots versus where and I say dynasties, if you want to consider it one dynastic run, or if you want to, or if you want to say right the early 2000s and then the teens, well the 2010s, not teens, 2010s. If you want to consider that two different dynastic runs, or if you want to include that as one run for the New England Patriots, whatever, whatever. I'm okay with either one, and I don't really want to have that discussion right now. But anyway, there was a sense of invincibility of the team throughout the team. Most notably, that there would be a next man up mentality. Of course, the exception being with Tom Brady. Right? We all acknowledged, we all saw that a lot of it was, of course, due to Tom Brady. Now, if we're casting who gets the most credit or more credit, I think a lot of people would say it's both, but I think most people will acknowledge, hey, the players go out on the field and win or lose games for you. Okay. So, but anyway. So when you compare that, though, the next man up mentality did also apply to Tom Brady in the sense that there was a Jimmy Garoppolo waiting and a Jacoby Brissett. And not that those two would have been able to win a Super Bowl by any stretch, but let's remember the Matt Castle year when Tom Brady was out. It wasn't a complete disaster. It wasn't a complete dumpster fire. And even the Cam Newton years, not great, not great, but there was still that sense of, all right, they could maybe do something. And then toward the end with Mac Jones, then the Patriots obviously became more of a laughing stock. Fine. Uh, but I think that had a lot more to do with the bizarre coaching decisions, which we'll get into that at another day. That's not for the conversation. But anyway, right, it was the next man up mentality. It didn't matter whether it was the early 2000s or 2014. There was always this sense of the Patriots are coming for you, and the Patriot way is that much better, and at the very least puts their team in the best position to win. Whether they win or not, like it's going to be a fight. And it was more holistic. Now compare that to Kansas City, and people give Andy Reid a lot of grief for aspects outside of his work without Patrick Mahomes. And the one main thing, and this is almost a double-edged sword. I'm almost being unfair because on the one hand, you have Patrick Mahomes, and so of course you utilize him to the best of your ability. I'm saying this now too, that I don't think anyone would give this team a snowball's chance, and we saw this too at the end of the Kansas City even being able to play to stay afloat. Right, we saw this too at the end with Gabbard. Now they went on to win and beat the Chargers, but they beat the Chargers 13-12. So, but right, in terms of the offense, this is an offense that more or less relies on the mobility of Patrick Mahomes, whether he chooses to take that time off or take the time off to mostly stay in the pocket and rely on his defense through the regular season and then pick moments to be great, or whether he enters certain games just expecting to be more mobile. Either way, it starts and ends with Patrick Mahomes' mobility as a quarterback and being able to go off script, being tough to take down. Compare that to Tom Brady, where, and again, I'm not either coach. If you take out Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, right? You're not you're happy to make the playoffs if you're either team. So that's not what I meant by my earlier comments. All I meant by that was that was in terms of the coaching. If you want to say Andy Reid is right now the best coach, fine. But let's say particularly, I'm almost more impressed with Bill Belichick later because he did a lot, or he squeezed, I think, the most out of what he could. And for those who say, well, Bill was the GM, it's very much widely known that Bill Belichick abdicated the decision making to others, and that Robert Kraft himself got way more involved toward the end. So uh, I'll just say the drafts were more successful when it was very clear that Bill Belichick was the number one guy where the buck stopped in terms of drafting. That's all I'll say. But anyway, but anyway, um, so all I mean by all we're doing here is we're trying to paint a picture of comparing. Tom Brady could play until he was 40, 41, 42 because the advantage was the system, the preparation, and Tom Brady just making the right throws from the pocket on time and everyone knowing what they needed to do. You don't get that with Patrick Mahomes and this system with Andy Reid. Even with Travis Kelce, a lot of it is off script. It's sometimes in terms of Patrick Mahomes, it's him ad-libbing, and that's not going to be as sustainable as the Tom Brady Patriots way, and then Tom Brady with the Bucks. So this is going to be a shorter lifespan because of that. And then you couple the fact with, for now, the Kansas City Chiefs defense is good, and Spagnuolo deserves a whole lot of credit. But let's see. Let's wait and see if they can run that back a second year, that defense. And again, Chris Jones re-signing him, massive. But the secondary played spectacularly last year as well. And filling in some of those holes, I think we're going to see is a little harder to fill. And then I don't care who was brought in. I don't care how bad last year was. You still have some of the same wide receiver concerns. Maybe not to the same extent, but I still have the same concerns. Now, we couple this with the latest story that's coming out of Kansas City, Missouri. They are going to be, in all likelihood, moving locations, and it's not just across town because of the stadium needing a revamp. More likely than not, they will have to move states. And Kansas is already making a push. They are already making it clear that they want to be the front runners in terms of this. Kansas is trying to lure in the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas City Royals. And I think this is a good idea because everyone who doesn't know basic geography thinks the Kansas City Chiefs are in Kansas anyway. So it really would be no harm, no foul in terms of the name. Keep the name. But that aside, moving from Missouri to Kansas, that's just another added distraction. And in terms of everything I just outlined, in terms of my level of concern, that specifically would probably be closer to around, I don't know, like less than 5% of the total concern pie, less than 5%. But I do think it's something that weighs in on it's a cloud over the franchise that no one else has to deal with. And like I've said from the beginning, I'd rather just, it's so hard to win a game, let alone a series of games, let alone enough in the regular season so you make it to the playoffs, then let alone when needed in the postseason. It's so hard as is that any small thing, anything extra that's distracting, it doesn't help. Doesn't help. Now, luckily, they could do something so that I think this would be one of the more smoother city transitions. Because, for example, let's take the Chargers going from San Diego to Los Angeles. Um, no one really cares in Los Angeles. Why? Because it's Los Angeles. Um, right? No one really goes that team, so that team took something of a hit. And now going from for the Raiders, now going from Oakland to Las Vegas, definitely not nowhere near as bad as the Chargers situation, but still not as ideal. I think they would have rather have stayed. I do. I think they would have rather have stayed in Oakland if that could have been worked out, and that would have been better. Right? The Raiders are the iconic days that those Al Davis teams that they were a part of Oakland. Not really the same persona as as Las Vegas. Those two cities. Let's just keep that real. So no, I say all that to say if you go to if you go right there to Kansas, right across the state border, at least you have the same general fan base right there. And it's not as bad of a trek. So that's the one thing you could say about this that you wouldn't mind. Right? The Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, you're right there, so it's not a huge deal. But I do still think it's a change and an added distraction that I just rather would do without. And I think that's more than fair. And so could it be I think there would be less of the resentment and a little less of that why should I continue to care about this team? I think that is true, that is fair. But still it's another aspect that is a part of this team then that I'm sure they'd just flatly rather not deal with. That's how I view things, but let me know what you think. We are going to be streaming whenever we're streaming. We're just going to catch as many live games as we can. Appreciate all of you tuning in.